In 2013, a British man accidentally threw away a hard drive.
Yes, you heard that right. $500 million in Bitcoin is buried right here in Newport.
Now, you've all heard of the guy who threw away a hard drive containing 8,000 Bitcoin on it. He threw it away in a landfill in South Wales, Newport, South Wales, years and years ago. And those Bitcoin today would be worth a lot of money. Now, the guy's name is James Howells, and he was interviewed yesterday on BBC Radio 2 with Vanessa Feltz, who is a bit of a TV personality in this country, in the UK. And I love hearing mainstream media, especially BBC or Channel 4, one of the big mainstream channels, discussing Bitcoin or any Bitcoin related topics. So I wanted to bring this interview to your attention because I've of course got a couple of thoughts about what Vanessa said, what James said, and it's just a fascinating story. It's absolutely incredible, the story behind him throwing away his hard drive with all these Bitcoin on it. But I've selected some parts of the interview, just a few minutes worth, and I'm going to go ahead and play through the interview and we're going to listen to it together, okay? Let's listen to how she introduces her guest, James Howells, the guy who threw away 8,000 Bitcoin. 8,000. Blows my mind.
Almost 10 years ago, James Howells threw away a computer hard drive during a home clear-out. At the time, however, he was unaware that he'd just chucked out 8,000 Bitcoins.
She says Bitcoins, but it's a common error. It's typically widely accepted now that the plural of Bitcoin is Bitcoin. 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 12 Bitcoin, 129,000 Bitcoin. I think that's the number that MicroStrategy are holding.
Digital key, which is a sort of code, is used to prove ownership of the funds when you make a transaction. The important thing to understand here is that this is stored on the hard drive, so it's not like a password that you can use on any old computer. The key to the Bitcoin is specific to that particular computer.
Now, one of the main reasons I had to share this video is because everything she said there is completely wrong. Okay, total fake news, misleading at best, but actually completely wrong. So I imagine that somebody from the BBC Radio 2 production team was asked to write her this little intro about Bitcoin and private keys. Let me tell you a little bit about private keys. Private keys are just a string of digits, 256-bit numbers, so binary 00110, looking something like this. It would look something like that. Okay, just like a string of digits. Now you can reduce that into a hexadecimal format, which is 64 characters, and it would look more like this. But if you'd have heard what she said, and I'm tempted just to play it again, let's just play this last bit again.
So it's not like a password that you can use on any old computer.
She says it's not like a password which you can use on any old computer. It's literally just a string of digits. James could have written down the private key on a piece of paper and photocopied it 10 times and backed it up all over the place. Obviously, he didn't do that. But if you didn't know any better, you would have heard what Vanessa said there, and you would have thought that Bitcoin was literally permanently attached to one specific computer or hard drive. Of course, that doesn't make any sense because you can transact with it, you can send it. And the private key, which are the keys to spend your Bitcoin, can be stored in all sorts of ways. They can be stored on a hard drive, on a USB stick. They can now be stored as a pass phrase, like a 12 or 24 random words. Or you could even memorize the private key if you had a really good memory. So Vanessa has made a mistake already just a few seconds in here, which was not surprising, but again, a bit disappointing to see.
1,000 Bitcoins weren't worth an awful lot in 2009, but now they're worth something like £150 million.
150 million quid for these 8,000 Bitcoin. That's at today's prices, which is pretty cheap, really.
James joins me on the programme. Good afternoon, James.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you for having me.
What a story. My goodness me. Shall we start with Bitcoin and what turned you onto them so early in the game when other people viewed them with great suspicion and also didn't understand them, as many of us still don't?
Well, Bitcoin is a new form of currency. It is a peer-to-peer electronic cash without the need for any third-party involvement.
Now, I'd seen this story in the news over the years, as I'm sure you have as well, but I was quite pleased to see how much of a Bitcoiner James still is. He's obviously still very passionate about it. He's still talking about it, and he gets his chance here to kind of try and educate the British public a little bit about Bitcoin. But let's see how he gets on.
Yeah.
Now, that caught my attention because in late 2008, as most people remember, we were going through the financial crisis. At that time, I didn't believe, personally, what the mainstream media was feeding us.
Now, I find this hilarious, and I was doing washing up last night listening to this, and I just thought, that's great. He's literally on mainstream media, on BBC Radio 2, about as mainstream as it can get, with Vanessa Feltz, this kind of, TV personality, and he's there saying, I didn't believe what the mainstream media was feeding us, but it gets better. Keep listening.
So I went online to financial forums, and I wanted to find out for myself what was going on within the financial world. Was it as bad as we were being told?
Right.
And what
You can already tell she's getting a little bit kind of right.
I found out was it was 10 times as bad as we were being told.
Okay, so he's saying it's actually even worse than they were being told, and he's kind of very much in the space of Bitcoin is real and the financial system is pretty screwed, which is kind of my message here on YouTube as well. Like, we are heading pretty rapidly towards pretty chaotic financial times.
Right. So you thought, let's forward to the bit where you thought, right, Bitcoins is a good investment.
So,
She wants to move along the conversation. Yeah, I could get on with it, mate. This is BBC now. Stop, speaking truth on here.
Fabulous. So how
a
much
few
did you
months-
spend on them in the first place?
well, I didn't actually spend any money on them. When I came across Bitcoin, it seemed like a good solution to the current money printing epidemic.
Yeah, money printing epidemic. So he's very much on the Bitcoin, mentality of a hard cap money would be beneficial for the world. She moved along that conversation very quickly.
We're currently going through.
Right.
Bitcoin is a limited supply currency, and there is only 21 million coins that will exist. Nobody can print any more or create any more out of thin air. So that appealed to me in the early days. I didn't actually buy Bitcoin. I was that early that I actually used my laptop and my computer to create or generate Bitcoin at the time.
Now, it turns out that James Howells was actually super, super incredibly early to Bitcoin. He was the 5th person to be running Bitcoin.
I was involved in Bitcoin in early 2009. I was one of the first 5 people in the world to be running the software.
And being amongst the first 5, that's significant, isn't it?
And many other people can say they were there at the start when they changed the world.
In 2009, James mined 8,000 Bitcoin with a value of approximately nothing.
When James Howells was running Bitcoin, as Hal Finney put it, there were only 4 other nodes on the entire Bitcoin network. This is February 2009. I cannot stress how early James Howells was to the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin story. It's truly an incredible thing, actually.
Bitcoin at the time. So
That sounds like a private license to print your own money.
Vanessa sounds pretty skeptical. Printing your own money sounds silly. Let's get you home, Grandma. She's thinking, basically, isn't it?
the valuation of the coins has always increased over time. And I believe it will continue to increase over time. So, you know, we're talking about £150 million today. In the future, we're going to be talking about $500 million or $1 billion.
Yeah, so that's interesting. If you're watching this video in the future and Bitcoin is already at $100,000 or $1 million per coin, then you're looking at much bigger numbers. At $100,000 per coin, those Bitcoin would be 800 million. And at $1 million per coin, you're talking about $8 billion. That's $8 billion of Bitcoin buried in a landfill in Newport. That's bigger than the GDP of Tajikistan. It's a huge, huge number. So what are James's plans for these 8,000 Bitcoin if or when he recovers them? That's what Vanessa asks next up.
And you've offered all sorts of inducements and blandishments, haven't you, to sweeten the pill and persuade the council? What are the sorts of things you've offered them?
I've offered to, you know, give and share the rewards with the people of Newport by giving them crypto directly. I'd like to set up blockchain education hubs. I'd like to put crypto point of sale devices in every store in Newport and educate people and create an economy based on cryptocurrency in South Wales, which people can benefit not only today but into the future.
I loved it when he said this. I was actually getting quite excited because most cryptocurrency innovation is overseas. The UK is completely left behind in the dust. Not quite as bad as the rest of Europe and the EU, but it's not great. And just the thought of like you know, the ideas of finding these 8,000 Bitcoin and then generating like interest and investing in education and adoption in Wales, you know, very close to home here in the UK, was really exciting. So it kind of got me thinking, I really am backing this guy. I really want him to find them.
It's not only myself that has a problem in this situation. I'm not sure if Newport City Council are aware of the types of material that they have been putting into that landfill.
So this is where he's making the accusation that actually there's other stuff in the landfill that shouldn't be there, and they could kind of kill two birds with one stone. But it gets a bit heated now. Listen carefully as James is kind of making his point, making his claim, and then Vanessa kind of pushes back quite heavily on it.
What do you mean?
The types of material that have been put into that landfill should not have been put there. I don't want to be antagonistic and cause any issues. I'm trying to provide a solution.
Well, all I can say is obviously I can't prove or disprove what you're saying here on the Jeremy Vine Show, so we have to be careful about your making allegations when it seems, I think, will seem to many people listening that what you really want is your own hard drive back, and whatever else is in landfill is not your major concern.
There are two problems with this landfill.
Okay.
I've got a problem with a missing device,
yes,
and Newport City Council have got a problem with the types of material that they put in that location.
Well, that's what you're suggesting. Obviously, they don't have a chance to respond to that on the radio, so we'll leave that side of things there.
I would like to have a conversation with them where I can explain the solution to, you know, we've got two problems and one solution. And I think that if they had a face-to-face meeting with me and my team members who can explain how this can be done in an environmentally friendly way, we are fully funded and we've got insurance in place and funds in a bond scheme so Newport City Council can rectify any issues. Once they learn the facts on the ground, they might be a little bit more comfortable about taking steps forward.
I had no idea how much backing James had, and I'd seen this story over the years, but I had no idea how seriously he was committed to this endeavor. He's clearly very keen and very committed and very willing to do basically whatever it takes to get those Bitcoin back, you know, within the legal framework. And he's got investors, he's got professionals, he's got experts, and this was quite interesting to me because I hadn't realized the lengths at which he'd gone to get this hard drive back.
We've got the best data recovery team in the world. We've got access to class 10 level data recovery facilities. They're willing to provide a VIP service on this operation.
James, is there a moral here? What's the moral of this story, if there is?
I like this part as well. She asks him for the moral of the story, and then when he gives it to her, she doesn't like it, and then she tells him the moral herself. But I'll let you decide.
This one.
We've got an opportunity to solve two problems.
That's not a moral. The moral is something like never throw anything in the trash until you've checked that it is trash, or something of that kind, isn't it?
Because of my situation,
a hard drive in the hand is worth two in the bush, or something of that ilk.
Because of my situation, we are able to raise funds which can also solve another problem.
All right, James, thank you very much. Thanks for talking to us and telling the story, and also for keeping such good humour about it.
Okay, so she's basically cut him off there. Yeah, like he wasn't going to say the moral of the story is don't throw away a hard drive, but he looks at it as two problems and one solution. The problem that the council may or may not have with the waste, and then, you know, finding those Bitcoin. I mean, there will become a point where digging those Bitcoin up will become like a no-brainer, where let's say they become, you know, 80 billion, right? We may be talking a while now, but can you have $80 billion buried in a landfill in Newport? I don't know. One last thing here, just her final thoughts here, her closing statement.
After all these years. James Howells there, what do you think about this? Are you a Bitcoins investor? Do you understand his pain?
Are you a Bitcoins investor, she says. Yeah, again, Bitcoin investor is probably the more technically correct term, more widely accepted term there. So when I hear someone say, are you a Bitcoins investor, it kind of hurts my ears a little bit to hear that. So I really enjoyed this interview. There aren't many interviews with James Howells out there. It's quite unusual to find an interview like this with him, and I just thought it was a really interesting story to share. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Check out my street interviews where I basically take to the streets of the UK and ask people what they think of Bitcoin, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.